Alzheimer's alternative therapies. I'm calling it alternative because it's not mainline drug therapy of what I'm going to be talking about. And in a moment, I'm going to give you seven things to consider if you're concerned about this issue and you want to see if you can improve the health of the brain. Okay, that's going to be the purpose of this show. Now, the reason I'm taping this on June 8th of 2021 is we just heard in the past couple of days, it's a hot news topic of this new Alzheimer's drug that was approved controversially by the FDA. And because this medication has conflicting scientific evidence if it's effective. It looks like that it might be effective in reducing the plaques that are so important that we hear about in Alzheimer's dementia. But the controversy is if it actually slows the decline in memory and thinking. Now, of course, if we're somebody that has Alzheimer's dementia and we're noticing that we're having a cognitive decline, the most important thing for us is quality of life. So if we're targeting, or the main goal for us is not what a fancy picture looks like or a lab test or whatever, we just want to see improvements in what's going on here. As I move along in my clinical practice, in my chiropractic office, I talk a lot about brain health. I talk a lot about health and wellness in general, but I talk a lot about brain health. And I've talked a lot about Alzheimer's dementia in the past several years. I've given people a lot of references, which I'm going to give you in a moment on this list of 7 things. And I would say in the past, I'll say 7 years, I have approached 50 people, 50 families that have had somebody in the family or a parent or something that has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia. And I've talked about these different programs and so forth, okay? And it's just worked out this way where one particular program, Dr. Dale Bredesen's program, The End of Alzheimer's, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. 49 out of 50 people said, no, we're not going to do it either. And the most common comment was, I know that blank person won't do that. More on that in just a moment. But I have this one couple that did it. So the woman was diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, and she went on this program. Now, you can imagine the program has some nutritional things and exercise things and lifestyle things and so on and so forth. And she noticed, and her husband noticed, improvements in her cognition over the past several years now. The two of them did the program. As a matter of fact, their son also did the program because it's a good brain health and body health program, not just for the brain for somebody with Alzheimer's dementia. So if I do this show here and one person watches it and takes action because they're a caretaker, or they have a parent that has this problem, or you're watching this and you have been diagnosed and you decide to take action, it was worth our time. Because it already was worth our time. The fact that I had one family that took this information, ran with it, and saw measurable improvements in quality of life. And I thought that that was really awesome. Okay? So let me get into the program here. So we've got 7 things that we're going to talk about here on this program. Number 1 is making a decision. So if you're a family member and you're a caretaker, and let's say you have a parent that was diagnosed, or if you were, or if you are a healthcare provider and you have a patient or a client that's been diagnosed, and you want to get started, make the decision. We are going to do this. The quality of life is important enough that we're going to turn over every stone to make it the best quality of life. Anything that's reasonable, anything that's doable, that is, let's say, inexpensive, that has been shown to have effectiveness in improving the health of the brain, and has little to no downside, maybe a little bit of expense, then you make that decision. And if you are somebody that's been diagnosed, or if you're a caretaker of a person, start thinking about, okay, we're going to do this. You approach that person, or if you are the person, and you say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a list of things that I'm going to do, more on that in a moment, and I'm going to create a team. I'm going to create a team of people around me that can support me, having an important support network, as opposed to just doing it on your own, which is going to make it a lot harder. But if you have friends and family and neighbors and so forth that can work with you on these programs, you can have a much higher rate of success. It's kind of like somebody that hasn't exercised in a long time in many years, but gets a workout buddy and gets a trainer and goes to a gym and has this protocol and has accountability and so forth. They have this network of stuff that really improves the chance of success, decreases the chances of failure, right? So that's what I'm talking about, making the decision, creating the network, okay? Number 2, then we need a program, right? So this is the second thing here, is looking at these programs like Dr. Dale Bredesen, like Mary Newport, like Dr. David Perlmutter in his book, Brainmaker, okay? So the first one here is The End of Alzheimer's with Dr. Dale Bredesen. And we'll pop that stuff up on here so you can see that. The End of Alzheimer's. Actually, Dr. Perlmutter reviewed the book, and they are both medical physicians and so forth. And this is a handful of years old now. It's 2017. I've talked about this on the show before. And I wanted just to come to the crux of it here. And this is such an interesting little quote. This is chapter 10 toward the end. Putting it all together, you can do it, is the name of the chapter by Dr. Dale Bredesen in the book, The End of Alzheimer's. This chapter summarizes the RECODE protocol, his protocol. This is the one that my patients did with that effectiveness. Boiling it down to the essentials to make it as easy as possible to use and offering a table to which you can refer coming up. As you'll see, it's pretty simple. All the scientific details, all the lab tests, and all the treatments and the preceding chapters boil down to 5 key points on what you can do to make give your brain a best chance of being better. 1, insulin resistance. We're going to talk about that as we move along here. A lot of people call Alzheimer's dementia as type 3 diabetes. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 3 diabetes, or diabetes of the brain, and I think that that's a good way to think about it. Number 2, inflammation and infections. Call it inflammation, systemic inflammation. And if you start doing good things for your health, you decrease systemic inflammation, which will decrease the inflammation on the brain, which gives your brain an opportunity to work better, which gives you a potential of having a better quality of life, which may reduce the symptom progression if you've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, maybe. Okay. Number 3, hormone, nutrient, and trophic factor optimization, so nutrients and supplements and so forth. Toxins is number 4. And restoration and protection of lost or dysfunctional nerve synapses. Now, the table is fairly intensive. I'm not going to get into all of it here, but he talks about the like a ketone-based ketosis diet. Of course, there's lots of exercise, regular and enough sleep, reducing stress. More on that in my list in just a moment. Brain training, MCT oil. More on that in a moment. Then there's supplements like curcumin, there's herbs, magnesium, PQQ, resveratrol, omega-3s, liposomal glutathione, vitamin D, mixed tocopherols, vitamin E, and so forth. The End of Alzheimer's by Dr. Dale Bredesen. Take a look at it. Then there's Brainmaker by Dr. David Perlmutter. I've talked about David Perlmutter on the show many times. He's written many books. These are excellent books. What's interesting about Brainmaker is you think, okay, he's going to be talking about brain stuff and things I can do for the brain. He talks a lot about the brain-gut connection. If you improve your gut, you're going to improve your brain. If you improve the health of your gut, you're going to settle down, in most cases, what's going on with your immune system. Okay, so that's, again, falling into that number 2 list here of having a program. You can follow the program of Brainmaker here with Dr. David Perlmutter if you want to. This was an interesting little piece that I saw that I wanted to go over. This is going to talk about depression and Alzheimer's, kind of putting them into the same bucket just for a moment. When I think about our soaring rates of depression, now this is a section of depression, but you'll see why I'm talking about this in a moment. I wonder about the impact of our sedentary lifestyles and diets that are loaded with pro-inflammatory sugars, the SAD diet, the standard American diet, too many pro-inflammatory omega-6 fats, and too few anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats. I've talked about that extensively on this show for hundreds of years. We know, for example, that the typical Western diet high in refined carbs and factory fats, meaning foods that were produced, that are man-made, meaning the stuff that Jack LaLanne told us 60 years ago, if man made it, don't eat it, and if it tastes good, spit it out. I've talked about that on the show as well. diets that are filled with foods that are high in the glycemic index and so forth notoriously increase inflammation. High blood sugar, in fact, is one of the biggest risk factors for depression, just as it is for Alzheimer's. Again, high blood sugar or blood sugar dysregulation, the inability to control blood sugar, type 3 diabetes for the brain, type 2 diabetes that is so common. And later on in that same page, he talks about how many people, when they have diabetes, their rate of depression goes way up. People with diabetes, their risk of Alzheimer's goes way up. Blood sugar regulation is so important here. And how do you handle that? You handle that with better nutrition and regular exercise and reducing stress and taking care of your spine and your nervous system and so forth, okay? Then we have Alzheimer's disease. What if there was a cure, by Mary Newport. Now, she's talking about medium chain triglycerides, or MCT oil, and or coconut oil, if you will. She has a great book here. I recommend it. It's about 10 years old now. In the section on what causes Alzheimer's disease, in chapter 15 of her book, heredity plays somewhat of a role, but environmental factors appear to influence how our genetic makeup will play out as we age. She had some interesting statistics in here. Let's see if I can pop those up here in just a moment. Oh, this is so important. We all want to blame our genes for causing stuff, and she says in here about 0.1% of people with Alzheimer's have the familial form of the disease passed to them as a dominant mutated gene from their parent, and these unfortunate people usually develop the early onset form of the disease before age 65. 0.1%, which means that you had, no matter how healthy you were, I lived great, and I slept 8 hours a day, and I ate super clean, and I exercised, and I had a fulfilling life, and a beautiful relationship, and wonderful children, and I felt fulfilled and satisfied, and whatever, and I prayed to God, and so on and so forth, and I developed Alzheimer's. That's 0.1%. That means 99.9% of people, it's environmental, which means it's things that we can control. Very interesting. Dietarily, she talks about dietary deficiencies, such as certain B vitamins, vitamin D, omega-3s is important. Don't drink too much alcohol. And then she also talks about cholesterol myths. I'm going to be doing another show on cholesterol in the future. We talked about you must drive down. We've got this passion in this country to drive that cholesterol number down as far as we possibly can. And a lot of us, myself included, are saying, that's not a good idea because cholesterol is needed by the body, and if you artificially drive it down too low, some people, many people, myself included, think that that's probably not a good idea. The cholesterol issue in general focuses on levels that are considered to be too high, but low cholesterol levels also appear to play a role in Alzheimer's disease. Extremely low cholesterol levels are associated with higher risk of death from cancer, for example, and are associated with higher mortality in general. High levels of cholesterol may even be protective against Alzheimer's disease. So you need a program, as we're talking this about here, to follow, and that would be step 2 on our list. Step 3 is stress. I think chronic stress, and I've done a bunch of shows on here for the past few hundred years on my show here, and if you missed anything recently, you can catch up on my YouTube page on the effects of chronic stress. Not an acute stressful thing, but chronic stress. And if you need assistance there, then I recommend you follow some people online or get their books, such as Trish Wynot and her book, Why Me, Why Now, Why Not? Or you get Marianne Williamson's book, which I just finished, and it's so fantastic, Tears to Triumph. She's written many, many others, but you could get that. Anything by Dr. Kelly Brogan, the one that I've talked about and that I've read is called Own Yourself by Dr. Kelly Brogan. Anything by Wayne Dyer, anything by Tony Robbins, anything by Louise Hay, Earl Nightingale. I'll be talking more about Earl Nightingale coming up. Lissa Rankin is a medical physician. She talks about mind over medicine, and she was one of many doctors that had chronic illnesses nobody could figure out, and sure enough, it came down to chronic stress, in which she straightened her relationship out with that. She got cured, and then she writes about that. Lissa Rankin. Kim Duramo has the Mind-Body Toolkit. Another one, medical physician, chronic stress, illnesses, couldn't be figured out, finally figured out it was chronic stress, fixed that, and now she's dedicated her life, as Lissa Rankin has done, to straightening out that chronic stress situation. My goodness, even myself as a chiropractor, much of the chronic spinal stuff that is going on, and some of the acute stuff that I've talked about recently on this show, we can relate to stressful events and our interpretation to circumstances around us. So that really is important for the health of the brain, particularly the chronic stress. And we know when you get those cortisol levels that are constantly dripping through our bodies, that's going to interfere with your glucose metabolism, okay? So when you are under chronic stress and your chronic stress chemicals are up, that blood sugar dysregulation, again, is all messed up. Type 3 diabetes of the brain. When you continue dropping the stress chemicals in there, you're taking away blood flow to your gut. You mess up the gut, you mess up your immune system. You start messing up your brain, and so on and so forth. So it's all connected to that stress thing. Such an important thing for all of us to work together as a team to address that. Number 4 here, of course, is exercise. Every time we move our bodies, it's wonderful. Everybody knows the benefits of exercise from a cardiovascular standpoint, but don't forget blood flow, right? So blood flow is opening up our blood vessels to make sure we get blood everywhere, not only to the heart, but also to the gut and also to the brain. So not only that, but the other part of exercise, which is equally, if not more important, is every time you're moving your body around and all of your joints and your tendons and muscles in a gravitational environment, all of those important nerve endings that are buried in those joints and tissues and tendons and muscles are firing those electrical impulses to the brain. One of the problems with Corona jail is everybody's activities, kids and adults, went way down. We weren't activating and stimulating our brains as much during this whole process, and that's a problem, okay? So regular exercise to your tolerance, with your doctor's approval, with somebody watching out for you, and I'm encouraging you to check with your doctor first before beginning an exercise program, specifically if you haven't exercised in a while. But remember that exercise is so important for the electrical impulses to the brain and blood flow and getting waste products out of the brain and so forth. Exercise is just so important, right? All of these books in here, all these programs that I'm talking about, talk about the importance of physical exercise for the health of the brain, short-term and long-term. Not only for treating Alzheimer's dementia, but possibly preventing it, and just keeping age-related cognitive decline at bay as well. Okay, next up on our list here is number 5, taking care of our spine and nervous system and chiropractic care. Now, is there any studies that talk about chiropractic care for Alzheimer's disease? No, there isn't. But there is chiropractic research out there that talks about chiropractic care and stimulating those powerful nerve endings in the spine improves blood flow to the brain. That's pretty cool. That sounds like it could be something important for us, right? So once again, better taking care of spine means better blood flow to the brain, okay? That's part 1. Part 2 is we know that one of the most important electrical stimulations to the brain are not only all the tissues in the body from exercise that I mentioned a moment ago, but the highest concentration of those nerve endings that fire into the brain are in the tissues in and around the spine. So you get even more bang for your buck if you're taking good care of your spine. So your spine needs to be aligned in a gravity environment, so we need to take care of these misalignments. More importantly for most of us, we need to be taking care of this situation, right? How many people that you know that are older that are like this and their brains tend to be sharper? Fairly consistent finding. How many people that you know that are older and their spines are like this and their brain is usually not working as well? Again, fairly consistent finding. There are exceptions to that, but you can notice that if you do this, your brain goes south a little bit more. Higher chance of that happening. So we know that taking care of the spine from an alignment standpoint is important. But remember, the movement of the tissues in and around the spine are important. So keeping spinal flexibility and mobility up is important, not only with stretching, but with chiropractic care. Because chiropractic care is going to look at each individual segment of the spine and make sure each one is working so you get the best benefit from all the activity that you're doing. That's the chiropractic deal, improving blood flow to the brain, improving electrical impulses to and from the brain. Very, very important there. And the best book on the planet ever written on taking care of your spine is a book called Happy Back by, Dr. Scott Fuller, that's me. So that's the best book ever written on taking care of your spine on your own. So check that book out. It's pretty well done. I did a good job. Then we talk about, the next one here is water. Again, a rough number, I would say 80%, 75, 80% of people are chronically dehydrated, and that's going to affect all portions of our body. It's going to affect digestion, it's going to affect heart, it's going to affect blood volume, it's going to affect brain. So don't drown yourself. Water is hormetic like lots of things in our lives, which mean none is bad, too much is bad, but the right amount is just right, okay? Most of us tend to lean on too little water, and I find that a lot of older people in particular really avoid water because they don't want to get up at night to have to go to the bathroom more. So in my information that I share, and I've done this on this show before, I instruct people, load up your water earlier in the day. First thing in the morning you're drinking water, drink most of it before dinner, and then shut yourself off so you don't have to get up more, but you're actually keeping yourself hydrated. And I've just seen so many people get a lot better by just increasing their water intake. And then last, this is such an important one as well, having lots of older people coming into me as patients in my office is sleep. Good quality and enough sleep on a regular basis. There's a variety of techniques and tactics that we can do. One of them feeds into blood flow to the brain and sleep. Another one deals with blood sugar regulation and sleep as well. And that's not doing what we tend to do in the United States. It's eating big meals as dinner latest. So our biggest meal of the day is dinner, and it's late in the day, and it's getting later as our generations go along. And so we're going to bed with full fuel. Now the body has to deal with that fuel when you're not moving your body. So you go to bed with a full gas tank, and that's really bad. You're going to learn about in here with Dr. David Perlmutter and Dr. Dale Bredesen and Dr. Mary Newport and so on and so forth, is you don't eat the biggest meal just before you go to bed and there you go. We should do the European model, which is, in the other countries around the world, which is eating more of the bigger meal is in the middle of the day, but that's going to help your good quality sleep as well. The more fuel you take on board, the more glucose is released at that time, the more insulin release. The brain says, oh, it must be time to wake up because I see more insulin floating around, and you're not going to sleep as well. So look at that good quality sleep. There's a bunch of other tactics that I talked about here on the show in prior shows, so you can go to my YouTube page for that. But hopefully these 7 things here you'll wrap your head around and have some success with, and having a healthier brain. I'm Dr. Scott Fuller.